everyone, welcome to That's Cakeable. I'm Janine and this week I'm going to do something very quick and simple for you. So I've had a few requests of stripping things back to basics. So this week I'm going to show you how I split, fill and ganache a cake. Just remember there is no right way to do this is just my way. Let's get on with the video. Okay, so today I'm using 6-inch round strawberry cakes. I've got 3 cakes and I'm going to show you how to split them in 2 different ways. So firstly, you want to measure how high you want your layers and make sure that you can get a couple of layers out of each cake. These cakes baked quite low, so I'm only making 2 centimeter high layers for each cake. Now if you don't have a cake leveler, don't fear. This is how you do it with a ruler and a knife. It is great having a cake turntable for this method. So what I do is take my ruler and gently score some lines into the cake at the 2 centimeter mark. I then run the knife all the way around the cake, going slightly further in than we did with the initial scores, and now we're ready to level. With my cake on the turntable and my knife now sitting in that score line, I place my hand on top of the cake and turn the turntable, but don't move the knife. So what I'm doing is letting my cake do the work for me. If you do move the knife too much, you're going to end up with jagged layers. And that is pretty much it. As you can see, the top layer is pretty off kilter because the top of it baked unevenly. So I'm just going to go in and do the same thing on that layer. Went off on a tangent and freehanded that a little, but that's okay. Do as I say, not as I do. And there you go, 2 even layers of cake. The next way I'm going to show you is the easiest way possible. Now, if you make a lot of cakes, I can't stress to you enough how great an investment this gadget is. It's an Agbe leveler and it does all the hard work for you. Just like that. They are on the pricey side, but like I said, if you do make a lot of cakes, it's a brilliant investment. Okay, that's step 1. Now on to step 2. Now this part is optional, but I do it for 2 reasons. The first reason is I like to take the caramelized brown edge off my cakes. Some people love them, but for me, it's simply aesthetics. The second reason is I like to create a gap between the cake and the cake board so that I've got enough room to fill and cover my cake with ganache. Now you can do this layer by layer, just taking a knife and cutting the edges away. Or you can stack all the layers on top of one another and do it that way. This is the way I prefer doing it. Remember to try to cut straight up and down so you don't end up with a concave cake. Although it does happen at times, and don't worry, you can always fill it in with ganache. And the other thing that you may worry about is the angular edges that you may get on your cake. Don't worry about that either. The ganache will cover any flaws. Once I've done that, I like to put my cake board on top, the cake board that coincides with the size of the cake, and make sure that I've got about a fingertip's width around the entire edge of the cake so that I've got enough room to fill the cake with ganache. And that part's done. Remember to keep all your cake scraps. You can always use them for cake pops or cake clay. Pop them in a Ziploc bag and into the freezer and they'll last a few months. Okay, now it's on to filling the cake. So I start all of my cakes on a setup board. I take my setup board and then I take my cake board and attach the cake board to the setup board with just a little bit of ganache. I place a little bit of ganache on the top of the cake board and then I place my first layer of cake on. Now make sure that it's pretty centered on that cake board and you've got an even amount of space all around the edge. This cake I'm filling with a strawberry Swiss meringue buttercream made with a homemade strawberry reduction. Delicious. So I pop some of that on the cake and evenly smooth it around. Don't add too much, especially if you're doing a tall cake like I am, or you may lose a bit of stability. You also want to try to keep your filling layers reasonably even, and that will keep the cake more even also. On top of that, I'm adding just a very thin layer of zesty homemade lemon curd. This is going to give us a strawberry lemonade flavored cake. Now you may notice that the layers move around a little bit as you stack, and that's okay. The point is that once we're done, we want it to be nice and even. Try to concentrate any thinner layers, in this case like my lemon curd, to the center of the cake. It'll stop it seeping out the sides as much. Once I've completely filled and stacked my cake, what I like to do at times is take a couple of skewers and just put them through the center of the cake to secure it while I chill it. Once that's done, pop the cake into the fridge for about an hour or into the freezer for about 20 minutes, and then we'll be ready to do the next step. Okay, so once the crumb coat has had time to chill, bring it back and it's time to start on the good ganache coat. So what I did was I took those skewers out from the center of the cake because now it's nice and secure. And then making sure that my ganache is at about peanut butter consistency, I took a good dollop and I put that on the top of the cake first. Gave it a general level, and then I placed another 6-inch cake board on top of the cake. What I then do is go around with my bench scraper, making sure that the top cake board lines up perfectly with the base cake board. This will give you a lovely guide so that you have a nice straight up and down cake. Once that's done, it's time to go ahead and fill in the rest of the cake with ganache. So what we're aiming to do is to fill in that entire space between the top cake board and the base cake board. Because my cake is quite cool, I'm actually starting with the top section of the cake first so that the ganache doesn't get so firm that I can't scrape it. And then I go ahead and do the bottom section. Now don't be stingy here, more is more. We're going to be scraping off all the excess anyway. Go ahead and use your bench scraper to start scraping away the excess ganache from the sides of the cake. Now you want to make sure that your bench scraper is straight up and down, not leaning forwards or backwards or sideways, otherwise you're not going to have a straight cake. The other thing you might want to do at this stage is to make sure that that top board and base board are still nice and even. Sometimes they do shift at this point. Once your cake is fully covered in a good thick coat of ganache, pop it back in the fridge for about 5 or 10 minutes. And you don't want to worry too much if it's not perfectly smooth at this stage, as long as those sides are all well filled in. Now that that ganache coat has had time to set, it's time to finesse the smoothness. So for this step, what I do is actually take my ganache to a slightly runnier level. Now you don't want it really runny, but slightly runnier than peanut butter. Once again, because the cake is so cold, you want to do this in sections. I find that you get a much nicer result. So I add a bit of ganache to my first section, once again slopping quite a lot on, and then I take my bench scraper and scrape that section off. As you can see, it's now super smooth. Go ahead and do that section by section to the entire cake. Once again, I'm going to pop the cake aside to chill. Now I know there's a lot of chilling involved, but if you want a great finished cake, you need a great foundation. Put the work in now and you'll end up with a great result later. To remove the board from the top of the cake, firstly I take some boiling hot water and pop it in a cup, and then I take a small paring knife and pop that right inside that hot water. We want to heat that blade up really well. Now little by little you want to start running that blade just between the cake board and the cake. Go all the way around, little by little. You will pull a bit of ganache, but it's okay, it's very easily fixed at this point, especially because our cake is nice and chilled. Keep going around and try to be sure that the blade of the knife is actually hitting the top of the board rather than hitting the cake, if at all possible. This will just make sure that we lose less cake when we take the board off. Sometimes it behaves really well and you won't lose any cake at all. Other times, especially with white chocolate, you're bound to lose at least a little bit, if not an entire pothole. But don't worry, we can always use ganache to backfill any holes. Once you feel the board is loose enough, just gently twist the knife and the top will pop right off. In this case, it wasn't too bad, I didn't lose too much cake. Now it's time to ganache and level out the top. So once again, I add a very generous amount of white chocolate ganache on the top of my cake. And then with my angled spatula, I just go around and start smoothing it out. Add more as you see fit. I then take my handy dandy paint scraping tool that I found at my local hardware store, and I use that to start smoothing out the top of the cake. I find these guys to be an invaluable piece of equipment in my arsenal. I love them. Now to check if the top's level. I take my spirit level, place it on top and check it on both sides of the cake, sort of making a cross. Now as you can see, my cake is not level, so I know where I have to add ganache and remove ganache. Just go ahead and do that until you level the top off. Once your top is level, just scrape around the side very gently to create a little lip at the top of the cake with that ganache. There is a method to my madness and you'll see why in just a moment. This will be the last time, I promise. Just pop the cake aside to chill again for about another 10 minutes and then we're ready to finish it off. Okay, so we've just done our last chill and brought it back. Now, the reason that I wanted that lip around the top of the cake is for this. Once again, I'm taking my heated paring knife and I'm just going around the sides, laying the paring knife flat on the cake and very gently removing that lip. It ends up giving us a nice sharp edge. I take my handy dandy paint scraper once again and just smooth out the top of the cake and just draw in any of the edges that may have gotten a little jagged in that process. But because we've already chilled it and made nice sharp edges, this part is super simple. And that is it. That is how you get a perfectly smooth, round, ganached cake. Now, I know there's quite a few steps in this, but like I said earlier, if you start with a good foundation, you're going to have a great end result. Trust me. My top pointers would probably be making sure that your ganache is the right consistency and that you chill between coats. If you don't chill between coats, you're just going to be dragging chocolate and you're not going to end up with a smooth result. If you want my ganache recipe, it's over on my website at that'scakeable.com. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me again this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you're informed every time I upload a new video. And if you like this basics video and would like to see me do a basic series on other subjects, please don't hesitate to put your ideas in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well guys, I've shown you step by step how to start a great cake. So now you know what you have to do. Go and get your cake on. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.